this weekend in Messe, and of course monitoring the Orioles taking on the Blue Jays here at home. Nice to have them back at home and get some folks downtown here for a potential first place weekend battle with the Jays. But I'll tell you what, I've been reading some stuff, and Ray Bachman, our executive producer, found this piece. I'm dear friends with David Katz, who owns the postgame.com out in Southern California. Baltimore guy, Pikesville guy. We have Katz on from time to time to talk some Ravens football. But this guy did a piece out on the postgame.com on the toughest venues in sports. And, I see different top 10 lists and top 25 lists. I've made a few of mine. I've made top 50 Springsteen song list and Rush songs and Billy Joel songs in the past. But I love me a good list. Samuel Chi is the guy writing that. He writes for a bunch of places out on the web, and you can certainly follow his journey out on Twitter at The Playoff Guru, and is a college football insider at the San Francisco Chronicle as well as at the Postgame and RealClearSports.com. We welcome him in from beautiful San Diego, California. What's going on, Samuel? How's life out there, man?
Hey, Nestor. It's beautiful out in San Diego, but, I can say this probably 360 days out of the year. It's sunny, warm, nice, no humidity, just another day in paradise.
You've already made enemies here, Samuel. So, look, man, you work on this piece for the post game, and I love me any sort of list that we can argue about makes for fun. But this really is a great question. I think it's a little generational. I think it's where we are in 2016 right now as to whether the Ravens Stadium is the toughest place to go win or Lambeau Field's the toughest place to go win. I want to get your thoughts on how you constructed this list and where all the little pieces came from.
This actually was inspired by this week's U.S. Open in Oakmont. Oakmont has this reputation as being the toughest course to host a major golf championship. But, once I got through that, I was thinking, what about all the other sports? I used to cover the NFL, I covered college football, and I also did a lot of golf and soccer and tennis. So I've been to a lot of venues, and I'm also a fan, so I actually travel a lot of different places just kind of on my own when I wasn't working.
So you're like me. You like sit in the stands, not in the press box all the time, right?
Right, yeah. I've been to a lot of places, just sitting in the stands with everybody else and getting the experience. So, I've been to a lot of places, well over 100 places, probably worldwide. So I've even seen an Australian rules football game down in Melbourne. So I just thought about all the places I've been and all the places I've seen on TV and just kind of get a general sense and came up with this list. But, the one caveat with the list is this is only for places that still are hosting or are still being used for sporting events.
Right, you can't use Maple Leaf Gardens here, right?
Or Boston Gardens or the old Forum in Montreal.
Or the old Chicago Stadium, which was a hellhole, quite frankly, right?
Right, exactly.
So from a golf perspective, I can't argue Oakmont other than to argue, Augusta or places where guys could really choke away a 5-stroke lead on the back nine because it's just tough to play it, and you can lose a ball, right?
Yeah, the thing about Oakmont is, the U.S. Open traditionally is the toughest Open to play because the way the USGA sets up the courses and the way they really make it, so hard to even break par.
Even pin placement, right? I mean, that where they set a pin moves everything on various holes, right? Especially with
the pin placement, the way they grow the rough, the way they make the greens run fast. That's the way. Augusta National, you can shoot 20 under. I mean, Spieth, shot 18 under, or so has Tiger. But it's impossible to do that at the U.S. Open. I mean, Tiger did that one time, shot a 12 under one time, and that was pretty much unheard of at the height of his powers in 2000. But it's just something that the USGA just will not let you do. And Oakmont, of all the places that they use regularly, is the toughest place of all the places that the USGA picks to host their Open.
Well, part of this, and you picked Heinz Field on the football side, and that's where we're going to get sideways here, Sam. But, the interesting part is I would always have said Denver was the toughest place because throughout the 80s and the 90s and the old rock pile there and the new stadium there and the thin air, I think if you go back through the NFL over the last 30 years, Denver probably has an incredible home advantage. Certainly, it's tough to argue with New England in the modern era. All they do is win. All they do is host games in January. Lord knows the Ravens have gone up there a couple of times and bloodied their noses. And the Ravens have knocked the Steelers out of the playoffs in Pittsburgh in the past. The Ravens are a tough place to argue, because as a home team, nobody wants to come into Baltimore, but we have not played a lot of games in January here. I mean, one of the issues with the Ravens is they've lost big road games that's cost them the opportunity to play at home in January. I know I run all the road trips out of here, so I could see where you would pick Heinz Field, but I'm interested in why you wouldn't pick Foxborough, because certainly the way they've cheated there, manipulated locker rooms, manipulated footballs, all of that, I would think most people don't want to go to Foxborough, and Tom Brady's a part of that, but it's also a part of, there have been a lot of losing bus trips we've had out of Foxborough over the years, my man.
Yeah, Foxborough's definitely up on the list, and so is Denver. In fact, if the old Mile High Stadium is still around, I probably would have picked that. I mean, that place, of all the places I've ever been to, is probably the loudest, the toughest place with the thin air. You can sit there and not be able to hear yourself think. I think in Mexico, it's not quite as daunting or intimidating because it's a nicer place.
Well, you don't want to be a quarterback throwing an incomplete pass there either. That's the best chant in sports, right? When they yell incomplete, 80,000 strong. I had to explain that to Flacco before he went there and played the first game. He says he hears it now. He thinks it's funny.
It is funny, actually. I used to cover the Raiders, and that was, that was the old rivalry. That was one of the hottest rivalries in the AFL. Going in the NFL, going back to the AFL days. And it's a nasty crowd. It's loud. They got that chant going on. But in Denver, it's always been good when Elway was there. Even through through all those years, they had a couple of down years, but they're back up again. I think the stadium in Baltimore. Actually, I was there for their very first game as the Raiders played there. It has become like one of the toughest places to play. I obviously put New England up there, but I think New England has a little more to do just because, the not necessarily the atmosphere. I mean, I think the atmosphere there is tough and intimidating, but it's just because you're going up against a good team.
Well, Pittsburgh has the towels, right? And Renegade, and you see it physically. I mean, the Ravens had the Ray Lewis dance, which we don't have anymore, which was this sort of battle cry, intimidating thing that can be done. But I do think the winning and the losing part of it, no one wants to go to Heinz Field. I don't disagree with you. But I have been up there enough, and I've been to all the NFL stadiums, all the baseball stadiums, and most of the hockey rinks and basketball rinks, but not all of them. Certainly not the ones north of the border in Canada from the NHL side. And I would say I've been to Heinz Field enough to have seen it sort of dissipate and seen a lot of empty yellow seats. We always play night games there, right? And as much as they get geeked up and there's a drinking crowd and stuff, there's always a lot of empty seats in Pittsburgh when I'm there. So, and I'm not even being mean or being provincial. I don't want to play a road game there that matters ever, but I don't see it as the intimidating place, quite frankly, that I thought Three Rivers was. I thought Three Rivers was nasty, and the Ravens always stunk there, the Oilers always stunk there, the Browns, the Bengals. Nobody ever won at Three Rivers, but part of that may have been they had better football teams at some point during that era too.
Well, yeah, during Three Rivers, that's when you had the Steel Curtain, you had the Brashaw teams, the ones that won 4 Super Bowls. I think one of the reasons I pick Heinz Field is the conditions. The field is terrible. It's always a terrible field. The players hate it there. I remember talking to a lot of players. They always tell me this is one of the places that they hate to play the most.
The wide receivers have told me it's like running in a sandbox. That's the way they've described it.
Yeah, Fred Taylor talked about the place. It's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. And then, you throw in the wind. The south end zone is open. The wind blows in and swirls around. So there's some X factors there besides just you're going up against a good team. You're dealing with conditions. You're dealing with, the field. And, and a lot of times you play there in December and January. It's cold. It's a different kind of cold. It's just kind of freezing cold that makes you uncomfortable. I've been to Lambeau in January, and Lambeau is a tough place in January. But, actually Lambeau is actually too nice now. They did a lot of things for that stadium. They renovated it. There's a lot more modern convenience.
It used to look like an erector set. Now it looks like they fixed it up. I would agree with you. You used to walk underneath of that. It looked like it was going to fall apart. Doesn't look that way anymore. Right. I mean, money builds nice places, as you know, right? But nice places often, as you pointed out, Camden Yards sucks for intimidating the opponent. Memorial Stadium was a place no one wanted to come and play. Sometimes the places, when they get nice, they get kind of friendly and soft.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's definitely true. You know, it's actually one of the hardest things for me to do on this list to pick out arenas for the NBA and NHL because there's just no arenas like the old ones we just talked about, that Maple Leaf Gardens, the Forum in Montreal, the old Chicago Stadium, Boston Garden, all those places. They don't exist anymore. That's why I picked Joe Louis. Even though they're going out of business next year, at least they're still going to be in play for one more year. All these new arenas are all so nice. They have all these modern conveniences and you know, and you got the fat cats and the expensive seats, so they're not as loud and obnoxious as they were in the old days in these old bandboxes. So, you know, and that's actually really what the toughest part is, to pick out the toughest place to play in the NBA and NHL, because really nothing that stands out all that much anymore because they're all so nice.
Samuel Chi writing all things sports and a lot of college football as well, out at the San Francisco Chronicle as well as at the Post Game, owned by my pal David Katz from Baltimore. And he wrote a piece out on the Post Game as well that you can check out, the 10 toughest venues in sports. And you can follow Sam's work out at The Playoff Guru on Twitter as well as at RealClearSports.com, which also has a political arm to it as well. Let's get to baseball here. And you know, I'm with you. There are no intimidating baseball places where the place is beating down on you and full, and it doesn't feel like a football game in most places. I think in October, certainly Wrigley Field will feel that way. Fenway feels that way. Certainly Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, had some incredible October mystique, and the fact that you weren't going to walk out of there and win. You have picked Fenway Park. Hard for me to argue, right? I mean, I went famously to all the ballparks last year, and I toured on our Give a Spit tour. I don't know that I really attended a game where in June or July where it was packed and angry and we've got to win this game. Baseball's really not like that, and it doesn't lend itself to handkerchiefs, although the Homer hanky was big. It doesn't lend itself to pom-poms or inherent noise like maybe it does in Japan, or the whistles and the bells in South America. It doesn't have that kind of vibe, but Fenway Park's always full, right? And Fenway Park, I think if you're a visiting player, it's awkward. There's a big wall. There's a long field and right field. The fans are right down on you. You feel like you're playing in a minor league park. There aren't 3 decks and stacked up when the ball goes in the outfield. You don't lose it up in the upper deck the way you do in a lot of ballparks if you're an outfielder. I'll tip my cap and say okay on Fenway Park. But I would tell you, most places where there's a good football crowd, usually when the games matter in October, it changes the dynamic. I mean, if the Cleveland Indians get into the postseason, their postseason games become football games. And that's when baseball really becomes fun, right?
Yeah, you know, the difference between Fenway Park and all the modern parks is just because it was built in 1912. I mean, there's only 2 parks that are really old. That's Fenway Park and Wrigley Field. And since, you know, the Cubs play so rarely in the postseason and haven't really had any success really going back 100 years, it's hard to say. And it's called the friendly confines. How do you say, you know, the toughest venue when it's a friendly confines? Yeah, and Fenway really wasn't that tough a place to play until the last 15, 20 years. I mean, you think about it, the Boston Red Sox actually had this label as a choker and the ones that they always find a way to lose in the postseason for 86 years. They never won the World Series. But the thing about Fenway that's tough is, you know, on opposing players, you talk about the wall, you talk about the angles in the outfield. It's not a symmetrical ballpark. Everything is weird, the different dimensions, and also, you know, one of the worst locker rooms for visiting teams because, you know, they did a lot to spruce up that place. So let's face it, was built over 100 years ago. There's a lot of limitations on what they can do.
Dude, the bedroom in my condo is bigger than the whole locker room in Fenway Park. It's insane.
Yeah, probably.
You know, that's part of showing up there is you're going to be uncomfortable for as long as you're there, right? And that's really not the way it's laid out in Major League Baseball. All these new stadiums, you know, they have lounge chairs and, you know, flat screen TV. Not at Fenway Park. I mean, there's your popcorn over there and you a pitcher of water and a ham sandwich or something, right?
Well, yeah, and you sit in the stands, you know, they have these rows that were built for people that were in 1912. I mean, you know, we're a lot bigger now than they used to be. It's terribly uncomfortable. I mean, that's the thing people don't talk about is if you sit in the seats in the stand, there's a lot of obstructed views. There's a lot of uncomfortable seats, rows that goes like 20, 25 people. And if you're trying to go out and get a hot dog, you got to get, you know, at least a dozen people to get up and get out of your way. So it's not a terribly comfortable place unless you're sitting, you know, one of the boxes, you know, that they build. But other than that, you know, it's a cramped, uncomfortable. And the thing is, I disagree with you a little bit about the fans. It really is a very good baseball crowd. It's a very passionate fan base. They're actually almost like a football crowd. They know their baseball. They know when to cheer. They know when to boo. They know when to put pressure on you, and all of those things.
And you never see an empty seat at Fenway Park, unlike my
No,
argument
never.
about Heinz Field. I mean, part of it being a tough place to play is just having the place full all the time. Fenway's
Yeah,
always full. And
it's
if
always
you get in
full.
trouble there as a pitcher and put a couple of guys on, the crowd's gonna lean down on you in a way that it just doesn't work that way in Detroit or Chicago or many other places. I would agree with that.
And also the thing is, because the place is not that big, it only seats about 33,000. If you're visiting fans, it's tough to get tickets. It's not like a lot of stadiums when you go to a game where you see a lot of visiting fans there. And even in Yankee Stadium, a lot of times now, you see a lot of fans from opposing teams. You don't really see that at Fenway. I mean, the seats are at a premium, so basically the vast majority fans are always Red Sox fans, and you have a real home field advantage there.
Now, you picked Detroit in the NHL at the Joe. I will not disagree with that. I'll just tip my cap and say that, historically, it's very, very unique as a building as well. Another place I've visited a couple of times. I'll tip my cap to that. I have not been to Salt Lake City to give the old Delta Center, which is now the Vivint Smart Home Arena. God bless that. But I remember in the era of the Malones and the Stocktons, it was filthy, and I know their fan base has been waiting a long time there. But I always think of the people in Utah as kinder and gentler.
Not the basketball fans, actually. The Jazz fans are actually really nasty fans, especially in the old days when their owner, Larry Miller, was patrolling the sidelines. I mean, that place is a real edge to it. You think the Mormons are nice, but actually, you find that really not true in terms of sports. You go to a game at Utah or BYU, I mean, you find some of the nasty fans. And that Utah-BYU rivalry called the Holy War is one of the nastiest rivalries in college football. But, that arena in Utah, the old Delta Center, the Jazz were good for a good portion of that era when they opened it. It was the Stockton Malone teams. It's thin air. It's a tough place to play. It's always full, and the crowd goes crazy there. It's kind of coming back a little bit the last couple of years. They're building a young team, and they've been down for a couple of years. But, there's just no place in the NBA that you really get that kind of home court advantage anymore. So they're still kind of the top of the list just because of that.
Some of the places like Portland and, I put a game on San Antonio, Golden State, obviously, in, the last couple of years, they've gotten a lot more filthy. You know what I mean? Like, it's when they're relevant and they're the only team in town and the place is packed and it's a hot ticket, you certainly feel energy that I never feel at a Wizards game, right? Which is the local team around here. I want to get to college football because I know that's your money shot. That's what you do. I am not going to argue Tiger Stadium. As a matter of fact, I'm going to endorse it, even though it's one of the places I haven't been. I've been to most of the places in the SEC. I've been in some incredible college environments. But from what I see on TV, it's a place I want to go. It's a place I want to go on a Saturday night. And I can't wait to get there. And I'm going there because it routinely tops lists like this, Sam.
Yeah, and if you go, be sure you go for a night game. I mean, that place is hard to play as it is, but at night, that's why it's called Death Valley. It's loud, it's deafening, and it's just weird things happen to visiting teams. But the one thing I'll tell you this about college football crowds, it's not a particularly nasty crowd. It's not a crowd that's going to dump beer on you, going to swear at you and all that. People are actually, for the most part, pretty friendly. They root for their teams, but they're not really obnoxious or nasty about it. There's a little more edge to it when you go to an Alabama-Auburn game. But at LSU games, people like to drink. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I'll probably get some free crawfish, right? I mean, they'll throw me some in a boil, right? Yeah, right.
Yeah, make sure you walk through the parking lot. Lots of people will offer you whatever they've got on the grill.
I'm not going there without doing that. Trust me. I mean, it's like going to Ole Miss and not going to the Grove or whatever. You got to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's just a tough place to play. Bear Bryant hated to play in there, even though he had a 14-2 record there against LSU. But now with less miles, and the LSU's been good, and they're almost impossible to beat at home. I think they're 50-6 at home under less miles. Just the atmosphere. I mean, college football actually is the one where you really get the home field advantage because most of the elite teams, they fill the stadium. the place is packed, and got the band going, the crowd going crazy, and all of that. It's tough to win on the road, period, in college football. But I think LSU is tougher than most.
We are chatting with Samuel Chi. I'm out on Facebook Live as well as at YouTube on our WNST TV channel. Getting a lot of feedback on our Facebook thread here for this one. I'll tell you this, you've got this piece up. It's the 10 toughest venues in sports, and you can follow Samuel Chi out on Twitter as well at the Playoff Guru. So Roland Garros, another place I've been, Monaco Grand Prix you've listed in here, as well as Estadio Azteca down in Mexico. No doubt about that being a difficult place, at least in North America, to come and play soccer. You have picked Cameron Indoor Stadium, a place I have not been. Embarrassingly, I had a couple opportunities. My son's been there, and I haven't been there. It kind of pisses me off. But I haven't been to Cameron. But I went out to Purdue about 3 months ago for a really big top 20 Maryland-Purdue game. And I was so incredibly impressed by Mackey. Maryland lost that day. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't good. But I had the whole Purdue experience, and I loved every minute of it. And I even said to Luke, if I lived in Indiana somewhere, I wouldn't be an Indiana fan. I know John Harbaugh doesn't want to hear that with his brother-in-law. I would be a Purdue fan, even though I hate black and gold mostly, although I support Towson, I support UMBC. But that Purdue Boilermaker experience was my best college basketball experience, and I've been to a lot of college basketball gyms. I thought the Minnesota experience at the Barn's pretty cool too, but it's hard to argue with Cameron, and it goes back to my Steeler football argument. They win championships there, and they win championships there because not only because they get great players, they have a great coach and a tradition, but because you can't go there and win. It's a hellhole.
Yeah, it's a hellhole, and a couple of things that made it a little bit different from a lot of places. Like UNC built the Dean Dome, and UK has the Rupp Arena, which is still fairly new. The thing that sets Cameron apart, it's an old place. It doesn't seat a lot of people from the outside. I mean, when I walked there, I almost missed it the first time because it looked like a classroom building. It doesn't look like a basketball arena at all. And the other thing that they do is they let the students sit in the best seats, which nobody does these days. In college basketball, just like all the other sports, including college sports, it's all about making money. So you have the fat cats, the alums that are, old but can't really make a lot of noise, sit in the best seats. But Cameron, they let the students sit in the best seats. They're to heckle the opposing team, and they're loud, they're obnoxious, they're clever. They come up with chants. They're well prepared. I mean, they do research on opposing teams as much as their basketball team does, and they'll come up with some nuggets that they know about certain players, and they're going to get on top of them and tell them that. So that makes a place to play. I mean, I know a lot of teams, when they walk into that building, they're already beaten because not only you're facing a Duke team coached by Mike Krzyzewski, you're dealing with the crowds and you're dealing with the noise. You're dealing with people talking about you, about things that you might not want them to talk about. So to me, that's hands down the hardest place to play in college basketball. But you're right, Mackey Arena, Assembly Hall in Bloomington, in Indiana, those are all tough places to play. The Big Ten actually probably has, more tough places to play. Not that Maryland's in it too. It's probably the toughest place to play as far as the conference, but I think Duke by itself is the hardest place as far as for an opposing team and players.
Maryland got better this year. As the team got better, the crowds got better. I don't know how old you are, Samuel, but I remember 32 years ago, Herman Veal having panties and condoms thrown at him at Cameron in 1984. So that's how far back I go with the madness down there at Cameron. I guess there's a reason for that. Hey, man, we'll be following your work out at the Playoff Guru on Twitter. Tell me about what you do at the postgame and Real Clear Sports. You do a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, the post game and the San Francisco Chronicle, I write a college football column, every week. I'm mostly a college football guy. I've been doing that for the last 20 years. But my real day job is at Real Clear Sports. We're a sports aggregation site. We find the best content on the web and just put that together every day. So, there's a lot of stuff every day to keep me busy. So thanks for having me on. My Twitter handle is the Playoff Guru on Twitter. I rip about a lot of different things about sports. That's just what I do. I'm a writer, but I'm a fan at heart. So I just love sports, and I cover and I watch a lot of sports. My wife puts up with it, and I'm very thankful that I have the opportunity.
My wife signed on. I'm like, hey, this is what I do for a living, and it's all good. It's except when the Red Sox are playing the Orioles like the last 2 weeks, then it's not good. But it's she's a Red Sox fan, but I married her anyway. She's given up the Patriots. What more can you ask for? Sam, great having you on, man. We'll send everybody out to the Playoff Guru to follow along, and I'm certainly sharing out your toughest venue in sports. Great argument, great debate, great having you on, man. Be well.
Thank you very much, Nestor. Great to be on with you.
You got it, Samuel Chi, the Playoff Guru on Twitter. The piece is out at the post game, and you can check it out, the 10 toughest venues in sports. We're headed into the weekend. Birds taking on the Blue Jays, and, of course, I'll be watching Copa and waiting for Messe to get to the final so I can watch the great Messe play, hopefully, in New Jersey next weekend. We'll see how it all turns out. It is summertime, and the Ravens have hung up the cleats for a couple of weeks. You can read all the residue out at WNST.net, where Luke has been in Owings Mills all week long. We'll be at Camden Yards all week long as well. You can find anything you miss in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. Nasty at WNST.net reaches me as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Or you're watching us on the YouTube WNS TV channel, you'll be in for a real treat because I bring this guy on every other week for no other reason than I think he likes me, and he's still trying to repay me back at 1 cent per segment for the generosity of the Los Angeles Dodgers last year on the 4th of July on the Give a Spit Tour. Mike Harmon hosts sports radio out in Los Angeles, California, but he is a Chicagoan, and you can catch his act out at Fox Sports as well as at the Swollen Dome